Whether it be what to eat for lunch or what career path to go down, decision-making is an integral part of everyday life, and good decision-making strategies are particularly important to us as engineers. This video breaks down decision-making into its components, as a good understanding of the process fosters informed decisions. Decision-making is essentially a comparison of options. However, there are several grounds on which these options are actually compared. All decisions fundamentally consist of two main components: prioritizing objectives and evaluating objective fulfillment. Now, these are conducted independently to each other, and the final option that is pursued is influenced to varying degrees by each. This presentation explores these processes and how they contribute to the decision outcome. Let us consider the first factor, that is, prioritizing objectives. Whenever we're faced with a decision, there are certain objectives we have in mind, be these goals we're trying to achieve or repercussions we wish to avoid. They usually come down to seeking some form of gain while avoiding some sort of pain, literally or metaphorically. These agendas can be complementary, where the achievement of one coincides with the achievement of another, or they can be conflicting, in which case progress towards one objective may come at the expense of another. In either case, these objectives need to be prioritized. This often occurs informally, where we subconsciously value certain goals more so than others. An example can be seen in the case of a student buying lunch. In this simple case, the objectives under consideration could be eating something we enjoy the taste of, while another could be a desire to lose weight and take care of our health. Now, these two objectives are not necessarily conflicting, but can be depending on the food options available. And an important step in coming to a choice is deciding which objective to place more value to. In order to do this, we evaluate the importance of each objective relative to each other. And these priorities can vary significantly between people, and even be subject to change for a particular person depending on contextual factors. For example, if I've been having a stressful day, I may place more value on treating myself to something tasty, while if my weight has just been ridiculed, I may prioritize healthier options. Once the objectives have been identified, in conjunction with their prioritization, we need to evaluate the extent to which they are fulfilled by each option. This involves making value judgments with respect to each objective, whereby we appraise the degree to which each objective is achieved. It's no good if we decide that we want to value healthy eating if we cannot tell the nutritional information of the various lunch options at our disposal. This process can be done quantitatively, as is often done in engineering, where formal measures are often able to be determined or estimated, or it can be done qualitatively, where no numerical means of measurement are available, yet characteristics such as aesthetics can still be compared. It is important to note that this process is entirely independent of determining the importance of an objective, and some options may fully achieve insignificant objectives, while contributing little to much more important goals. The final decision ultimately comes down to a comparison of the various options, with regard to the objective weightings and their respective fulfillment. The net value of each option is estimated based on the product of these two factors, and the outcome of the decision-making process is the option for which this is maximized. This formal representation is quite useful in fully quantitative systems, where each variable can be evaluated numerically, as is often the case in engineering problems. However, it is rarely carried out explicitly for most other decisions. We don't generally sit down and write out lines of equations when considering our options for everyday decisions. However, this is not necessary for this understanding of decision-making to be true, as this process is generally conducted subconsciously or informally, but follows the same general structure. If you've ever sat down and created a list of pros and cons, you're doing exactly this, where you identify various objectives that are influenced by an option, and estimate a net value by considering the importance of each pro and con, and the degree to which that is achieved. The same is true for any reasoned decision, no matter how trivial. It is important to note that we frequently deal with decisions where the outcome of a particular option is unknown, and we need to make judgments based on the probabilities of potential outcomes. In these scenarios, one of the objectives that often plays a large part is our consideration of risk. We generally have a significant aversion to options where the magnitude of risk is high, but the likelihood is low, as opposed to those where the opposite is true. This is the basis on which insurance policies operate, as societies would expect to pay less in damages on average per person than they would expect to pay for insurance for any particular risk, meaning that taking out insurance is statistically ill-advised. If this were not the case, then insurance companies would not exist, as their net cash flow of payment in to payment out would leave them at a loss. That insurance companies do exist indicates that despite the apparent net present value over long periods of time, an individual is more comfortable placing themselves in a probable state of slightly less wealth if it avoids an unlikely state of significant loss of wealth. This phenomena does not change the decision-making process, but is simply incorporated into the prioritization of the objectives component. So now that we've defined the process of decision-making, how can we differentiate a good decision from a bad one? Just because I perform the process and perceive one option as having the greatest benefit does not mean that another will necessarily come to the same conclusion. In fact, this is often the case. Conflict can arise from differently prioritized objectives, as different people might value the importance of various goals differently, or from differently appraising the degree to which the objective is fulfilled, as this often entails a degree of judgment and estimation, which can yield variable results. How then can we objectively evaluate the quality of another's decisions, when our own judgment is just as subjective? Well, in some cases, objective measures are actually available, whereby a person may make a decision based on certain expectations of outcome. However, sometimes these expectations can be shown not to eventuate, indicating that the judgment of the individual in question was poor, and so their decision-making was poor. For example, if I choose to have a burger for lunch on the basis that its good taste would be a primary consideration in its favour, but then I discover that it actually tasted quite bad, this would be an example of poor judgment implying poor decision-making. While the outcomes of decisions can often indicate whether the judgments were accurate or poor, they can be misleading, and the quality of a decision is not defined by the outcome. As many decisions are made under uncertainty, they need to be judged based on the information available at the time. It is often easy to retrospectively ridicule a decision, but this is often done with additional information made available only in hindsight. Based on the information at hand, the decision could itself have been sound, even if it ended poorly. Alternatively, for decisions with inherently uncertain outcomes, where probabilities needed to be considered, a less than ideal outcome may eventuate due to the variable nature of the scenario, despite the best option being chosen. An example of this can be seen when planning for future weather conditions.